Hi, friends and students. Welcome back to Advanced Studio Classroom. Nice to have you with us today as we begin a new article, News from CNN. My name is John, and I'm very happy to be here today with you. I'd like the other teachers in our studio today to introduce themselves as well. First, we have...
Hi, I'm Anna. Welcome, everyone, to class today.
Nice to have you with us today, Anna. And...
Hello, this is Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne. Welcome back. And...
This is David, and we're all ready for the news.
We're all ready for the news. David, do you like to read the news and watch the news on television?
I do, and I especially like to watch CNN.
That's right. In fact, I would say for foreign news here in Taiwan, we don't have a lot of choices, but one of the good choices we do have is CNN. I'm glad that we're able to get CNN 24 hours a day with all the latest news. Well, today we're looking at page 38 in the August magazine. The article is News from CNN, and our first item is about that big hostage story in Peru. And the title of this item is Peru Standoff Ends. And I'm sure we all know, we all heard the news when it happened, that this terrible hostage crisis in Peru did finally come to an end. The situation could be called a standoff. Now, David, what is a standoff?
When two people or two groups or perhaps organizations are facing each other in some way, and neither one will give in. There's some problem, something they're fighting over.
All right, and this certainly was the case in Peru because the guerrillas, the rebels, had hostages in the ambassador's residence, and they said that they were going to kill them if certain demands were not met. And then the government refused to meet those demands. They refused to give in. So neither side would compromise, neither side would give up their demands, and so there was a standoff for a long time.
就是一个对峙，一个僵持的局面，那任何一方呢都不可以轻举妄动。
All right, so let's take a look at the first paragraph. Anna, I wonder if you can read that paragraph through for us, please.
Okay. Hostages held for more than 4 months in the Japanese ambassador's residence in Lima, Peru, were rescued late April by soldiers who stormed the building. All of the estimated 15 Tupac Amaru rebels in the compound were killed. 2 Peruvian soldiers and a hostage were also killed.
All right. So the first sentence tells us that the hostages had been held for more than 4 months. Now just imagine what it would be like to be a hostage for more than 4 months in some place. What do you think it would be like, Anna?
That's a long time to be in fear, maybe, of your life that whole time.
Yes, and apparently during that time, the rebels often told their hostages, if the government tries to come and take us by force, we're going to kill you, and this is how we're going to do it. And they sometimes would frighten the hostages that way. So from one day to the next, you wouldn't know whether you were going to survive or not. I suppose the ambassador's residence was quite a nice place. It's a big building and probably very comfortable normally. But under these circumstances, I suppose it would be quite uncomfortable. Do you think everybody was able to eat good food and have a bath every day, David?
Probably not. Usually, rebels, when they take over and they have hostages, they want to control as tightly as they can. They don't want anyone to get away. They don't want anyone to fight against them. So they just keep everybody in one place.
All right, and sometimes the government will cut off supplies of electricity and water and other services to a building so that the rebels or the people that they're fighting won't get too comfortable, and so that they won't remain strong and healthy. And I think that's what happened in this case. Supplies were brought in from outside from time to time, but I don't think they had the regular supply of water and electricity. But I'm not absolutely sure about that. Well, in any case, it was 4 months, more than 4 months, before the rescue happened. And the way it happened was that soldiers stormed the building. What does it mean when people storm something, David?
Well, here, storm means to go in very quickly with a purpose of fighting. We sometimes use the word storm with other military events. Perhaps you remember from the movie Star Wars, the Emperor's troops were called storm troopers, and they were all dressed in white, in white armor. Well, you don't have to necessarily have armor to be a stormtrooper, but you are generally some kind of somewhere in the military.
All right, so when soldiers storm, it means they come in great force, in large numbers, very quickly, all at the same time.
就是猛攻或是突袭。
All right, and what was the result of this attack by the government forces, Anna?
15 of the rebels were killed, and then there were 2 soldiers and 1 hostage.
All right, it's interesting that this sentence in line 25 says all of the estimated 15 rebels were killed. Well, I don't think it was estimated at that point. Then they knew exactly how many there were. Perhaps before the government troops stormed the building, they weren't sure exactly how many rebels were there. But they would certainly know now. So all the rebels were killed, and 2 Peruvian soldiers and a hostage. This was quite remarkable. There have been other cases when hijackers or rebels have held hostages, and when the government troops have tried to rescue the hostages, many hostages have been killed at the same time. This could have happened here. Fortunately, it didn't.
I have an interesting bit of information that they put a bomb in a tunnel under the main hall, and the rebels were playing soccer in there. So it really took them by surprise. I think that might have been they used a certain type of technology and warned the hostages did know. They had a 10-minute warning before they came in.
Right. The whole story, actually, of the way the government attacked the rebels and rescued the hostages is a very interesting story. The rebels thought that they were in control of the situation, but actually they weren't. And all this time, during these 4 months, the government was doing some very clever things to defeat the rebels. So if you're going to be a rebel and take hostages, well, I would say don't do it.
That's right. Don't do it.
Crime doesn't pay. All right. Well, let's go on to the next paragraph. David, well, first let's just look at this word compound in line 26, because that is a word in English that has several meanings depending on the context. What does it mean in this context, David?
In this context, it means the area that belongs to a home, or in this case, it's actually the ambassador's residence.
All right.
And I think this is more of British usage. Normally, I think in American English, we don't say compound, referring to the grounds around our house.
No. I don't think most British would either, but if they're talking about an area surrounded by a wall, several buildings perhaps, surrounded by a wall with some open space, you could call that a compound.
所以这个字呢，通常是指在一个围墙里面所包围的这个土地，包括里面的这个建筑物。那在这里就是指这个大使的官邸。
All right, well, let's go on now in line 29. David, can you read that paragraph, please?
President Alberto Fujimori, who had taken a hard line in refusing to give in to the rebels' demands to release comrades held in Peruvian prisons, toured the scene shortly after the standoff ended. He spoke with a group of hostages and soldiers who had gathered in front of the residence. The soldiers saluted Fujimori and sang the Peruvian national anthem.
All right, thank you. So, this is the President of Peru, Alberto Fujimori, or Fujimori. The Japanese pronunciation is probably Fujimori or something like that. The Spanish pronunciation is Fujimori. And if you listen to CNN, you'll hear the news announcers usually saying Fujimori when they give his name. That's the way the Peruvians say it. Anyway, the Japanese would say it differently. This president of Peru is actually of Japanese descent. His parents came from Japan to live in Peru, and the Japanese like him. He's a good friend of Japan, and the Peruvians like him too. A lot of the Peruvian people think he's an excellent president. In this case, he had taken a hard line in refusing to give in to the rebels' demands. Anna, when somebody takes a hard line, what are they doing?
They've made a set decision, and they're not going to budge from that decision.
All right, a hard line means a tough policy, a very tough approach to something, and you don't give in, you don't back down.
就是一个采取强硬的态度。
Now we see here that the rebels had demanded that their comrades would be released from Peruvian prisons. And the president refused to give in to that demand. He refused to release any of these comrades. Why do you think the word comrade is used here, David?
Often today we use the word comrade when the group is a communist group.
All right, that's a word that communists use among themselves. They call one another comrade. And that means sort of friend, co-worker, fellow rebel, revolutionary, people who are in the revolution together. And this group is a revolutionary Marxist kind of group. Their idea is that they want to get rid of the government of Peru and set up a revolutionary government and do various things that communists like to do when they take over countries. Alberto Fujimori has taken a very hard line all along with these rebel groups, and that's one reason why he's so popular. He's been able to put down a lot of the terrible fighting and terrorist attacks that Peru was suffering before Fujimori came to power. So these rebels demanded that their comrades be released from prison. There is a fairly large rebel movement in Peru, and there are very poor people in Peru. You can understand why there would be a revolutionary movement in Peru, because there are some very rich people and many very poor people, and some people think that the wealth should be shared more equally among the people. And so those who have fought against the government and tried to bring revolution, many of them have been caught now and put in prison. In fact, I think there are about 400 comrades of this particular rebel group in prison. And the rebels wanted all of them to be released. That would have caused a lot of trouble for Peru, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, and so Fujimori said, no, we're just not going to release them. Forget about that. Well, Fujimori was there on the scene as the standoff ended, as the troops stormed the building. He was right there in the neighborhood. Maybe he was very confident that things were going to turn out well. And as soon as all the rebels were dead and it was safe to go in there, Fujimori was right there, and he toured the scene shortly after the standoff ended. He spoke with a group of hostages and soldiers, and then the soldiers saluted him and sang the Peruvian national anthem. So the soldiers, I think, were very proud of their president because he gave them the opportunity to solve this problem. And, of course, the president was proud of the soldiers, too. Well, before we go on to the next paragraph in the middle column, let's listen to a little skit.
Hey, boss, this Peruvian standoff has lasted so long.
4 months? What are we going to do? There are hostages still in the building.
Yes, the Japanese ambassador's residence is filled with Tupac Amaru rebels.
I don't know what's going to happen. It's so dangerous.
Have any of the hostages been killed yet?
I don't know what's happening.
What's the president going to do? President Fujimori won't let the hostages come out yet.
Well, that's because he won't give in to the rebels' demands.
You mean he won't release their comrades from prison?
No, he won't. He has taken a hard line. He has refused to give them their demands.
Boy, I hope no hostages die. What are they going to do?
I guess they just have to wait and wait and wait even longer.
This standoff may never end.
All right, let's go on now to the paragraph beginning in line 35 in the middle column on page 38. We see here the crisis had dragged on for 4 months, but ended in less than an hour when explosions and gunfire erupted around 3:20 p.m. on April 22nd. A short time later, as light smoke curled up from windows and air vents, some of the 72 hostages were seen being hustled off of the roof by troops. Soon afterwards, soldiers on the roof were seen embracing, cheering, and raising their arms in a sign of victory. Well, let's go back to the beginning sentence in this paragraph. The crisis had dragged on for 4 months. What does that mean, Anna?
It's a feeling of this is never going to end. That day in and day out, the hostages didn't know if they were going to live or die, and so something that takes a long time.
Right, something that takes a long time and is not enjoyable. If you're watching a very exciting movie, you wouldn't say that the movie is dragging on. But if you're listening to a very boring speech, you could say, oh, the speaker dragged on for hours and hours.
所以这边就是指持续的拖延下来。
All right, it dragged on for 4 months, but ended very quickly, ended in less than an hour, when explosions and gunfire erupted around 3:20 p.m. on April 22nd. Now, we've seen this verb to erupt quite a number of times in Advanced Studio Classroom, and it also has, several meanings depending on the context. What does it mean here, David?
Here it means happened or went off. Gunfire went off, gunfire happened. Often we see the word erupt with a natural event that would be volcanoes. Volcanoes erupt and they shoot out liquid rock and steam and things like that.
All right, so when something erupts, it happens very quickly and violently.
就是爆发出来。
Sometimes people erupt. they lose their temper and get very angry, and they just suddenly start yelling or slamming the door, showing their anger. That means to erupt. Please don't erupt. And then a short time later, as light smoke curled up from windows and air vents, some of the 72 hostages were seen being hustled off of the roof by troops. So this is from the viewpoint of somebody who's observing this process from outside. Probably a reporter for CNN was somewhere outside the compound looking in and seeing what was going on. And so light smoke was curling up from windows. The idea here is that there was some fire perhaps and some bombs had gone off, but it wasn't like the whole building was on fire. It wasn't a big fire. Light smoke, just little bits of smoke were curling up, coming out of the windows and the air vents. And this is interesting that it happened in the middle of the afternoon. I learned in a report about this attack on the embassy that the rebels did not expect a daylight attack. And so during the daytime, they were kind of careless, playing games, as Anna told us earlier, and not paying much attention because they thought there's no way the government will try to come in during the day. And the government knew this. The government strategists, the ones who were planning how to get in there and rescue the hostages, probably thought, they don't expect us to attack during the day, so let's attack during the day. You think that's a smart thing to do, Anna?
Great idea.
Sure.
Catch them off guard.
Off guard, meaning not prepared, not paying attention. Okay. Good. So then this observer saw that some of the 72 hostages being hustled off of the roof by troops. What happens when you're hustling somebody off or hustling somebody away, David?
Well, you're trying to force them to move a little quicker. In this case, maybe the hostages hadn't been eating well, maybe they were sleepy, maybe they were sick. The soldiers were probably helping them to move faster, picking them up, carrying them, supporting them, but going as fast as they could.
Right. They wanted to get them out of there as quickly as possible. Why do you suppose they would hustle them off the roof? Why not just let them take their time and walk very carefully?
Well, just in case there are some other rebels left. You think you got them all, but there may be one or two left hiding that will come out from somewhere. Remember earlier we saw the word estimated. There were an estimated 15, but when you're in this kind of situation, you can't be absolutely certain.
Right, and also the rebels had brought some explosives into the compound with them, and they may have set up explosive traps. And if there were an attack, maybe a few minutes later, some bombs would explode to hurt the hostages or the soldiers. And so I think the soldiers just wanted to get the hostages out as quickly as they could, just in case something else happened. So to hustle somebody off or hustle someone away, Yvonne.
就是把某人驱赶，很快的赶走到某一个地方。
Right, now this verb to hustle does have other meanings in English as well. And we don't really have time to talk about them right now, but it does not always mean to hurry. It has other meanings as well. So be careful about the context when you use this word. And then soon afterwards, the soldiers began to celebrate. They were seen embracing, cheering, and raising their arms in a sign of victory. And that must have been a very happy moment for the soldiers and all of Peru. Well, let's go on now to the final paragraph in column 3. Anna, can you read that for us, please?
The rebels took hundreds of hostages when they stormed the compound during a party celebrating the birthday of the Japanese emperor. They released most of the hostages in the first days of the crisis. The government had tried to negotiate with the rebels, but talks broke down on March 12th, apparently over the guerrillas' basic demand, freedom for their imprisoned comrades.
Okay, thank you. And try to remember at the beginning of this crisis, right now we're thinking the government attack was very clever and very well done and successful, but think back to when the rebels first went in. Their attack on the embassy was also very clever and very well done. They tricked everybody, they fooled everybody, and they took over the whole place with great ease. Really, it was not difficult for them to do it. They were very smart about it. David, do you remember anything about the way they did that?
I vaguely remember. I think they actually went in with weapons.
Well, there was a big party. There was a big party that night, and I think some of the rebels were pretending to be servants in the party and bringing food in and things, and as they were bringing these trucks and vehicles with food and drinks, they were also bringing the things they needed to take over.
Sounds like a movie, John.
Yeah, well,
maybe there will be one.
I think I've seen one like that.
Yeah, it was very, very smart, and they surprised everybody. And of course, the government was very upset and disappointed when it happened. So they also had stormed the compound 4 months previously. They'd gone in very quickly with great force and taken over. And this was during a party celebrating the birthday of the Japanese emperor. And then you remember they began releasing hostages. They were letting people go and kept only the most important people, the ones they thought would be the most valuable, as hostages during the first days of the crisis. Negotiations went on for a long time. The government had tried to negotiate with them, but then talks broke down on March 12th, which was, I guess, a month or so before the actual storming of the compound by the government. And what was the reason? Well, first let's talk about breaking down. The talks broke down. What does that mean, Anna?
They can't come to an agreement, so then they just decided to stop trying to negotiate.
Yeah, I think the key word is stop. We use the phrase broke down, often referring to machines, cars. If my car stopped, I can't get it started. Maybe something inside has broken, or maybe it needs adjusting and I can't drive it. I'll say my car broke down.
All right. So when talks break down, people just don't want to talk anymore. And sometimes talks break down and they never do get started again. In other cases, they break down for a while and then somehow they begin negotiating again and talking. Yvonne, to break down.
就是在这边就是指这个谈判破裂了。
All right, and the main problem, the reason these talks broke down, was because there was no agreement about the guerrillas' basic demand. As we had mentioned before, these rebels wanted their jailed comrades to be set free. Now here in line 11, we see the word guerrilla used for the first time. David, can you explain that term for us?
Well, the word guerrilla comes from the word guerre in French, which means war. A guerrilla is a person who is using war tactics to get his objective. But in this case, they're sneaky tactics through hiding and quick movements, hit and run tactics in order to get their objective. Usually they're communist mentality on this.
Okay, Yvonne, guerrilla.
就是游击队队员。
Okay, we sometimes hear about guerrilla tactics, which is different from the standard method of warfare where armies come out into a battlefield and face each other. With guerrilla tactics, as David said, you hide, you don't show your face, you attack at night, you send out small groups instead of large numbers of people, and that's guerrilla warfare. And it's hard to fight guerrillas when they're fighting in their own territory and they know where to hide and how to hide. It's not easy to fight against guerrillas. And so here again we see their basic demand was freedom for their imprisoned comrades. So the situation now in Peru is that some of the rebels are dead. The guerrillas, the rebels who were in prison, are still in prison. They're not going to get out. One of the hostages has been killed, a couple of soldiers killed, but generally the people of Peru feel pretty good about the way this has been resolved, and they have greater confidence in their president now. And I suppose the rebels are going to think very, very carefully before they do something like this again. Well, we have one more skit to listen to, so let's listen to it now.
Hey, compadre, did you hear the news?
The news? Yes, I did. Everyone has heard the news.
The standoff has finally ended.
The crisis that has dragged on for 4 months has finally ended.
It ended in less than an hour with explosions and gunfire.
Oh, and as the light smoke curled up from the windows and the air vents, the hostages were freed.
Oh, and only a few of them died.
Yes, some soldiers died too, but not too many.
Afterwards, they were embracing each other and cheering on the roof, and President Fujimori is being called a hero.
Yes, they were raising their arms as a sign of victory.
Boy, that's such an exciting way to end a party.
Yes, what a long birthday party that was.
I wonder what the Japanese ambassador will do next year for his birthday.
I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, we'll see. I suppose the next time something like that, some kind of party or special event happens at the Japanese embassy in Peru, they will be very careful about security, won't they, David?
I think any government installation is going to be very careful with security in the near future.
All right. Well, let's hope that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, although we really can't be sure that it won't. Governments all over the world are going to be very careful about their embassies and watching for terrorist activity. We're going to be back tomorrow with another item in CNN, news from CNN, so join us, please. Thanks for being with us today, everybody.